Hello. The screencast is a presentation of the parent meeting on standards reference reporting that took place at Monticello High School in the fall of 2018 and also in the fall of 2017 when we were in our pilot phase. To give you a little brief history, standards reference reporting and the idea of making that shift in the state of Iowa started actually about 11 years ago with the rollout of the Iowa core curriculum under Judy Jeffries, who was the director of education for the state of Iowa at that time. Since then, Iowa has adopted other state standards such as the Next Gen Science Standards and have developed social studies standards for students in the state of Iowa. As we were looking at that as a district about 6 years ago, we decided the best way to truly align to standards and what the requirements the federal government and the state were putting upon schools and students was to actually teach to them and assess by them. And so we began exploring standards reference reporting. And teachers have spent about 5 years in professional development and working on refinement and development of courses that are aligned to standards, assessed by standards, and also report out by standards or grade by standards. And in doing that, we really had a lot of discussions at the high school level about what the purpose of grading actually is. And we believe that the purpose of grading is to communicate academic achievement at a particular point in time, like how are students actually doing, and just the academic portion of a course. That what we're reporting or what we're grading reflects what a student knows and can do in relation to content learning goals, not necessarily in class behavior or other learner behaviors, positive or negative, that impact a grade. What is it that kids really do know? And what are we reporting out to them and their parents? And then those things have been defined by the Common Core and the Iowa Core Standards. We all know that grades aren't essential to learning. As an adult, we learn a lot throughout our life, outside of school and at work, that we aren't necessarily given a grade on. Like, no one tells me I'm good at my job, so I'm getting an A+. I can learn those things without actually being graded. The whole grading system was designed to report out to parents and students to let them know where they're at. And we've gotten away as an education system away from just giving that grade on academics alone. We've put a lot of other things into a grade that kind of muddy the water. So we want to get real clear on it when it comes to academic skills. So we have a little simulation here that we did in the fall. This is a 9th grade foods class. We have Sally, who's receiving a 58%. This is under a traditional grading system, and she's failing the class. And Johnny, who's got a 99%, is passing the class with an A. So the question is, who would you want to cook for you? I think the obvious answer most people will come up with was, well, Johnny, he's passing. He has an A. He must know what he's doing. But really, when we dive into the grade book, I'm not so convinced. So here's the inside of the grade book. You've got Sally, who is really struggling to get homework done. It's either incomplete or it's missing. But when it comes to actually demonstrating what she knows and understands from the class, she's getting a 48 out of 50 in the cooking lab, which is an A. Is not doing extra credit and is still struggling to get that homework in. So she's missing a few assignments outside of class. But then the next cooking lab, she's showing a high level of proficiency and has earned all the points. No extra credit, and then is asked to make a meal at home and report out on it, and is 0 points. It's missing. It hasn't been graded. However, on the other hand, Johnny, who's showing he's got 99% in the class and overall A, is doing all the homework, but when it comes to cooking, he's not showing that he really knows the course content. He's not able to apply it. Does the extra credit, once again, does homework, but does poorly on the cooking labs or isn't able to apply knowledge and skills of the course content. Does some more extra credit and does the meal at home. So what's happening here? We've got Sally who's failing, although appears to know the course content, knowledge, and skills, and Johnny, who doesn't appear to know those things and is passing with an A. So let's think about this a little bit. Which student truly was demonstrating proficiency? And well, in my opinion, that would be Sally. She appears to be learning the course content and is able to demonstrate that when it comes to assessments and labs. So we're wondering about Sally a little bit. What could be interfering? Is there lack of parental support at home? Is there socioeconomic status, things that are getting in the way? Is she responsible for the care of siblings or other children in the home? Does she have to work a second job to help support family income? Are there some compliance or behavioral issues that are getting into her way of actually being able to get homework or other things done? So in this case, really looking at the grade book, what do those grades really represent? Is Sally being punished for her life circumstances, and is Johnny being rewarded for not knowing the content? And that's what a traditional system used to do. Extra credit, getting a lot of points through homework, completion, those types of things often reflected a grade that was either inflated or deflated based on whether or not a student got those things done, which is a behavior of completion. So it didn't necessarily always reflect whether or not a student knew the content of a course. So here's what we believe standards reference reporting will do for Monticello High School. We believe it will more accurately assess student achievement. We think it will clearly communicate learning goals to all stakeholders, students, parents, as well as other teachers, other educators. Develop self-directed and intrinsically motivated learners. It makes that shift from getting a grade and passing, which is an external motivation, to really developing that intrinsic motivation of learning. What am I learning? What do I know? What don't I know? And what do I need to get better at? It'll better address the needs of all students. Things like socioeconomic status or having to take care of siblings at home levels the playing field for kids so that all kids are treated equally in an academic system. Really focuses on student learning. We use a 4-point scale, which we'll get into a little bit later, that enhances the validity and reliability of academic grades. Practice, which was once called homework, is essential for concept development, but not necessarily in grade calculation. I think almost all of our high school teachers would agree if students don't do the practice, they won't necessarily do as well in the course. It's essential to continue to develop skills that are being learned in the classroom. Behavior is vital to student success and should be reported separately in the gradebook. That is now reported out via employability skills. If you were at fall conferences, you would have gotten a rubric on your child's employability skills and where they're at in terms of behavior and learner behavior and actually success in post-secondary living, learning, and working. And then academic grades should reflect academic achievement only. So we've taken that behavior and compliance piece out that could either deflate or inflate a student grade, so that now that what you're seeing is purely academic knowledge. The focal point of standards reference grading is learning. It's not about the grade anymore. We're going to talk a lot about student learning and where students are at in learning the course content. We are standards referenced at the high school, which is different than standards based. In a standards based system, students must be proficient in order to move forward or show a level of proficiency. We're not doing that at Monticello High School. We're in a standards reference system, which is a system that provides enrichment if a student already knows the content and intervention when a student doesn't. So we have our what I need time or win time. That's an intervention time that students can go in and work with teachers if they don't understand or don't know content or aren't able to exhibit their knowledge of that in order to continue to move kids forward within our academic system. In a traditional grading system, typically we would use a 100-point scale and external factors like extra credit, homework, classroom behavior to inflate or deflate grades. So they no longer reflect that in academic learning. You will not see extra credit in the gradebook anymore. Rick Wormley is an author and education, somewhat of a guru in education. He has a lot of videos out. We don't have enough time in the screencast to show you these. They were shown at the parent meeting. But if you Google Rick Wormley, you can watch quite a few of his videos. He has a lot of good things to say about standards reference reporting and standards-based systems. We also have some non-negotiables at Monticello High School. And here's what they are. Grading is based upon student achievement of learning. Academic achievement is scored separately from employability skills, so students, parents, and teachers are able to clearly distinguish between behavior and knowledge. You'll see that in the comments on your child's report card and then also at conferences in rubric form. Extra credit is not offered. Additional practice to develop skills is provided upon request. Homework, referred to as practice, is not included in the student overall grade. If you saw that in Power School, it's now excluded from the grade. You can see whether or not your child is handing it in and it's done and they're getting feedback on it, but it's not included in the overall grade. So if your child isn't doing well in a course, that's the first thing I would check, is whether or not they're actually turning in their homework or practice. Learning targets are clearly communicated. Final letter grades represent academic achievement only, and students may demonstrate proficiency over time. Course grades are finalized at the end of each semester. We used to give quarter grades. We no longer do that. Everything is now semester-based. We use a 4-point scale. If you would look in the Monticello High School Standards Reference Reporting Handbook that was provided to you earlier in the fall, we use a 4-point scale. When a student scores a 4 on an assessment, they've shown mastery or they understand that content at a deeper level. If they receive a 0, it's failure due to insufficient evidence. Either they haven't done it, or they've refused, or it hasn't been turned in. The teacher basically has no evidence to score any type of learning whatsoever. And then you've got your 1, 2, 3 being proficient, or they know it, they're at standard. Your 4 would be, are they able to apply that content knowledge? Are they able to make judgments and evaluate? Are they able to create new things using that content knowledge? Basically, do they understand it at a much deeper level? The employability skills rubric, if you attended conferences in the fall, you'll see now in the student report card, it would be under comments on a 4-point scale, under participation, work completion, behavior, and working with peers and adults. And that is scored on a 4-point scale. And if you have not seen the rubric, it's included in the handbook that was provided in the fall, and there are links to it on the Monticello website, as well as you can also receive that from your child's teacher. When we talk about retakes, reassessment, and redos for late work, once again, we show another Rick Wormelli video, but learning was never intended to be competitive. It's not a race. And so something that we've heard from time to time is, well, my child gets it before everybody else, and they understand it before everybody else. They should be rewarded for that. And that's not what learning is about. Learning is about each child and each student in the classroom getting to the point where they can demonstrate a higher level of proficiency over course content. Not everybody's the first in learning something or getting something right the first time, but given opportunity, all kids can learn and are able to show that proficiency if they so choose. Students still have the right to not necessarily go back in to reassess or reteach. Our teachers do go out and seek kids out and pull them in for WIN and request them during WIN time. But we do still have students who are choosing not to take advantage of that time. And it's our suggestion as parents that you really encourage your child to take advantage of a teacher when available to learn content for a course. Here's student thoughts. Your child might not like this. It puts a greater amount of responsibility and accountability on the student. They have to learn it. They're held accountable to meetings to their teachers. They have to be able to learn, unlearn, and relearn, and they have to study and reassess. A student is not allowed to reassess unless they have learned the content of a course. Embedded in this presentation, but we won't have time to show it here, are some thoughts from a former Monticello student who expressed that they really liked the traditional system in the sense that they could wing it a lot of times. They would take the C or the D on an assessment and they would move on. And standards reference reporting really forces kids to know that content. So how is the overall grade calculated? In a typical course, there might be anywhere from 3 to 7 standards. And that standard, each standard is assessed, and this is a simplified version, multiple times over the course of a semester. So let's say standard 1 here is assessed multiple times. You get a mode score. When Power School can't calculate a mode, it takes the higher number. That mode score then, or the mode score from each standard throughout a course, is then averaged together to get an overall course grade, which is tied to a percentage within the course. And if you need assistance in looking up your child's grade in Power School, there is a link to that as well on the Monticello website, where you can look at 2 different tabs. One will show this mode score for every standard, and the other will show the traditional grade. If you have any questions, that tutorial exists, And also, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact your child's teacher or building level principal on standards reference reporting.